What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on Cannabis, and if you're joining us on YouTube or on your podcast feed, we have a great show for you today. We're connecting with SuperSeed Co. We've got Neptune from NeptuneSeedbank. We're going to be talking all about SuperSeed Co's seeds, what he's been breeding and what he's been doing lately there. But then we're also going to be diving deep into tissue culture and how that applies to you as a home grower and all sorts of things. JR has a great show for you today. But before we get too far into it, I need to give a couple shout outs. First off, if you enjoy these episodes, if you enjoy this show, enjoy this YouTube channel, you can support us by joining our Cannabis community. If you search Cannabis in the App Store on your phone, or if you go to cannabis.app in your browser, you can join our members only community where you can post whatever you want, and you can join our live streams when we do these interviews, and you can ask questions and be a part of giveaways and all sorts of things. So if you want to be a part of that, search Cannabis in the App Store and use the code GROWERSLOVE for 50% off your first month. We really appreciate your support. It helps make giveaways possible, and it helps make things like our sponsorship of the Emerald Cup that's coming up in just a few weeks. We'll be there thanks to JR. Your sponsor, your membership helps support us and helps makes that happen. So we really do appreciate it. Also, shout out to our other supporters who help make things like that possible. Not Neptune. We'll get to Neptune in a second. But first, Lost Coast Plant Therapy. I've been using Lost Coast Plant Therapy lately on my grow, on my outdoor grow. I know JR uses it and his indoor grow as well. It's just a fantastic IPM spray that's organic. It's going to help fight bugs, powdery mildew, botrytis, things like that. Search Lost Coast Plant Therapy on any online store that you love out there, as well as just go to lostcoastplanttherapy.com, and we really appreciate their support. Also, my last shout out on my end is going to go over to SacredThreeMushrooms.com. JR has been having fun with their stuff over there and been really cranking out some great products. So if you want to figure out how you can grow your own fungi at home, go to SacredThreeMushrooms.com. You can get grow kits for $80, and you can crank out some great stuff in your closet or just your room, wherever. You don't have to have a big grow. And then I'm going to throw off my last couple shout outs over to JR, and we'll get into the interview.
Thanks, Q. First, we want to do our Tiki announcements. He's got, I want to actually hit him up on all three fronts. He's got his clones that he's offering. He's got that Tiki Rain that's being made available as a clone offering. And I can tell you from a pain perspective, the profile on that one is super unique, and it's very effective for pain. And then on his regular seeds, he's got gushers, he's got some yakuza, but he's also going to be doing some fem seeds of some of the stuff that he's more known for, the Devil Driver and the Super Plushers. So check out TikiSeeds.com and TikiCuts. I also wanted to shout out to Neptune here on NeptuneSeedbanks. I featured the Zade by our guest here, Mike, but it is already sold out. So if you want to hit these drops, you need to make sure that you're plugged in to the NeptuneSeedbank.com to get, because he'll flash these drops. He'll let you know when you need to get in on it, and they go fast. And judging by the phenos that I saw on the Zade, I mean, it's some amazing looking stuff. So shout out to that. And while we have Mike here, can you go ahead and maybe tell us a little bit about Zade and how it came about and what the profile is?
Yeah, so one of our first super seed drops was in like 2011, and we made a strain called Italian Soda. It was a Dutch treat hybrid, but like a really more shaved ice version, less super piney. And we did a very modest seed drop. I think it was like 5 packs of, each strain, maybe 3 or 4 strains. And one of those packs was purchased by a friend of ours in Alaska named on Instagram Honey Pit. And he's been holding the cut for like 10 years. And then we were Instagram friends this whole decade, but we became real life friends, one time when he was in Los Angeles, and I was lucky enough for him to bring me the cut. And so when I got his particular profile of the Italian Soda, it was more unique. We grew it for a while as a hash strain, which is mainly what he was focusing on in Alaska. It did great, really, really nice numbers, but also as a flower strain, It was a crazy potent sativa. Normally, a lot of the sativa profiles smell great. They're really good in rosin and hash form, but they're not as enjoyable for me to smoke in flower form. They don't get me as high as like something like a Chem 91 would. But this particular flower had a lot of potency along with a lot of the, these sativa traits. So we were able to use that particular cut of the Italian soda to make the Zade. We did it in a fem line so that we could pretty much isolate those profiles. And then when testing, we found pretty much a ridiculously stable version of the cut that he's been holding forever. The Seattle soda brought on some color. There might be some more purple from the normal green bud, but the average pheno people are going to find is a green phenotype. Pretty quick flowering because the Seattle soda was a quick 8-week plant, maybe even 7.5-week plant. And now that sativa gene's been muddled down to the point where it's finishing in, 8.5 weeks, but you're getting like these elongated flowers, you're getting decent yields, and then you're getting an incredible potency. So it's kind of a cool one. And by doing small batches, I don't have huge breeding rooms anymore. I kind of just isolate the profiles I'm looking to produce. And I set up the plan and I produce those profiles. I would rather have limited batches of things that I know that I love than large quantities of seeds that I now have expiration dates on them. And I'm trying this huge juggle to, like I saw the industry kind of doing these huge menus, 30, 40 strains at one time. And I thought of myself as a consumer going to a place I've never been before, and looking at a menu, whether it be a restaurant or you name it. And if you have that many options in your face, what is the best, and if you had the choice to just ask the chef, what should I try right now? He's going to say the tuna was caught yesterday, or like we just got this dry aged beef in, and like that's probably where you're going to want to steer, like your sample palette, as opposed to like when every decade, like 100 new strains come out and all the same breeders breed those same 100 strains. It's just like what happened right there? We just all made each other's shit. You're
one
losing
thing
the artisan thing.
One thing you mentioned that I thought kind of rung out to me is the stability factor. When you have a super stable female and then you breed that into itself as a fem project, are you breeding in that stability, or are those traits not necessarily carried on?
I was maybe 10 years ago, I was one of those really anti-feminized breeders. I thought you really could only do it with regular seed stock and selecting males and the whole 9 yards, which I had pretty good success doing. However, when I learned the feminized seeds are just seeds as well, you still need to put the same amount of effort in running test lots. You can make, the only way I can get away with something like not testing is if I literally cross the exact same 2 plants that I did to make the first run. So like if I remade Seattle sodas with the exact same 2 feminized, if I remade the exact same cross,
yeah,
I could feel confident about that. And because I found a really stable Seattle soda reversal, like that plant is better at reversing to make feminized seeds than it is as a flowering plant. Like the Seattle soda is incredible bud, purple, but like no yield, medium to low, like a more like a cookies variety plant, which in a tent has good viability, but in a commercial grow doesn't have any viability anymore. But what it does do is reverse incredibly well. So what it does is it lets the female shine in the crossing. So by using that Seattle soda, I'm really only imparting like kind of a little bit more potency, a little bit faster time, and maybe some purple. But she kind of lets the maternal line of that you're trying to cross shine. So with the Zade, it was an easy choice to use her because I wanted people to experience the honey pit cut. So you need to almost have a breeder that doesn't really change it too much. You don't need to have something that's freakishly outlandish. And even if you do make a cross and you do a brand new feminized cross, you need to run those seeds to make sure there aren't things like instabilities. Like people say a bunch of Hermes, like every once in a while, a hermaphrodite plant is normal. But if you do a seed lot and you're seeing like half of the offspring grow weird and then have undesirable flowering traits, that's a failure. And then you got to recognize like the 2 plants you crossed, who did it. If it's a plant that you always use and it made the Seattle soda, I've been lucky with because I just kind of inbreed my own SuperSeed stuff. I haven't really outcrossed. And if I do outcross, I get the other breeder directly involved as a collaborative effort. But I'm very I could predict very well my own pairings because I've just been breeding the same plants for 10 years. But I've seen where when I tried to do new stuff, even if I made fems, I had poor germination rates on this batch. And I was like, I wonder what was up with that. And these are things you note. And then when you see it happen again with the same crossing or a same parental line, you're going to go, okay, I don't know if I want to be using this one anymore just for the fact that it had poor germination rates. Then you go into like, okay, they germinated well. How do they grow? Do they grow nice? You know, the same things you would search for in a regular pheno hunt. I kind of look for healthy growing plants. You know, like if they veg really nice, that's a big check for me because I felt like when we've been in the space for a long time, but we weren't actively in the space until the past 5 years. And I felt that like other breeders were failing at even getting seeds to germinate, you know, customers having germination rate issues. And like, if you can't even succeed at that, like what the fuck, right? So it's like, I was telling my friends, they're like, well, you know, how are you gonna, I'm like, honestly, the game is so weird right now that if your seeds germinate, you're ahead of 50%. Like you're really ahead of the game. If you could guarantee those seeds are going to germinate, you're putting the customer ahead of everyone else. Now it's like they germinate and they grow healthy plants, you know, like you could do crosses and the plants all look like shit. I mean, you just gotta, if you don't test them yourself, you're not going to know that though. You know, like a tester can show you the one good plant and then you could like base your whole thing on that, but you're not going to see the hundreds of bad vegging plants that you would have never put your brand on.
Right.
So
Could
yeah,
you?
kind of regular. Gotta test that.
We were talking earlier about the drop that you just did and how folks missed it. But are there some strains that of yours that folks can find online right now? And then I'd love to hear what you feel some of the strengths are of those strains, like kind of what are they bringing to your grow? Because we have oftentimes people in our comments are like, they're looking for something that does well outdoors or indoors or, in various situations. And I just love to kind of hear what you feel are the strengths of the strains that you have out there.
I'm sure Neptune's got a lot of regular seed stock right now. The fems are going to be more rare because I'm doing those in like those limited batch drops. Um, the regular, if you've never bought super seed stuff before, you've never grown our gear before, the regular seeds are going to be a great entryway because, like I said, we spent the first almost decade just making regs. I mean, I spent more time making regs than I did. Fems are just within the last 5 years, let's call it. So it's a kind of a good way to find even breeding males. Like people will hit us up all the time asking permission to use stuff because we've already spent the time to work it, and we're totally cool with it. So like depending on what your goals are, I think without seeing Neptune's menu, it's hard to say exactly what's in stock. I'm sure maybe someone on this chat might be able to help us.
There's one on there that I was kind of curious about. The umami collab that you did. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Which one?
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Right. God, I can't even think of the last one I saw. It was.
I'll jump in and say this, if you don't mind. Umami and SuperSeed Co did the Zoda cross a few years ago. And then everything from that has just been absolutely amazing. And they continue to collab on those to this day. And so I would say if you could find something from Zoda, and it just really depends, you can check the Umami page in our website or the SuperSeed Co page on our website. We usually put them on both. But the Zoda crosses are amazing. And they've seen, tons and tons of like really good hashers that have come out of that, tons of really good yielders that have come out of that. Companies are hitting us all the time to do like specific, like, hey, I want to buy 10,000 seeds of them. And it's like, yeah, sorry, a lot of these are small batch only. Maybe we can get you the clone, something like that, licensing deals. So that's really, really good. I would also say for Super Seed specifically, I want to say we did a few drops for regs, and I think the Italian soda was one of them. I think he made some more, or you did an Italian soda outcross.
We have regs. Italian soda regs still exist. I just didn't know if you had them in stock.
I think we do, and people should hop on those because I remember the last time we actually saw Honey Pit when he was in LA. I linked up with him, and he gave me an Italian soda pen because he's really into making hash, stuff like that. he gave me an Italian soda rosin pen, and it was just unbelievable. The terps on it were unbelievable, crazy good, so good. My dad actually stole the pen from me. He was like, "No, I'm gonna go ahead." Like, all right, cool, dude. Thanks for that. And then I think we were in Oklahoma one time and we ran into a dude, or was it Colorado, that had like 2 different phenos of the Miami Zoda.
Miami, and that was Oklahoma.
That was Oklahoma.
Yeah, that was a crazy good cut. It was like a mango leaning one. It's really fun doing the shows because like I've been doing the soda strains for so long that we run into stuff we've never seen before. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is this? And he's like, SuperSeed, Super Miami. And I'm like, that's me. And he's like, really? I want to bring you a bunch of it. And I was like, okay. The dude literally left the convention and came back with nugs for us.
Oh yeah.
Like I was just smelling it the whole time. I didn't even want to break the bud down because I knew I wanted to show people back in California. But that's the cool part about breeding. I think I like that more than I think that's my favorite part, honestly.
Well, I remember he had 2 different phenos, a purple one and a green one, and we were like, this green one slaps so hard, it checks all the boxes, but we knew the purple one would be the only one anybody wants because if it's not purple, no one's gonna buy it, unfortunately. But like I remember the green pheno was just heads and shoulders on every other way above everything else. I think we kept that one for us to smoke.
Yeah,
so good.
Still remember that.
Well, moving forward, I'd kind of like to give us an origin story for SuperSeed Co. How did you get started breeding, and how did you come up with SuperSeed Co?
I came up with SuperSeeds when I was in college, but it was like for vegetable seed stock. I just thought SuperSeeds was really cool. It was like a little bit ahead of what my peers were doing. And then when I moved to Seattle, that was probably, like I said, 2010 or 11. They were like hinting about the legalization of cannabis. And at the time when I moved there, I was buying like $60 eighths. And then when I moved to Seattle, I met people on this island out there called Whidbey Island who were in my horticulture class, and they had fucking $100 ounces, and they were fucking purple, huge pinecone weed. And I was, what the fuck's up with this? And the guy was like, it's UW perp. And I'm like, well, can I buy some? He's like, yeah, because next time I buy an ounce, just split it with me. So for that same $60 or whatever that I was getting the eighth for, I was now getting a half ounce. And it wasn't like that small shit that was flown in from California. It was like fresh pinecone bud that someone just cut. So like after a few months of realizing that that's all that this kid smokes, I'm like, what's up with that? Like, where can we get those plants? And he said, no, it's just an old guy, and all he does is grow the UW perp, and that's his cut. He's had it since like 80 something, and like pretty much since we were born. And so like, well, I mean, that's what we were told. So like we end up meeting this guy, and I tell him like, hey, I'm going to make seeds. I already started kind of doing it. I gave him all the seeds I made at that time, which is like some blueberry time wreck crosses, and like DJ Short blueberry, and then the time wreck that came out of the TGA crew in Seattle up there. And then he was like, well, if you know how to make seeds, I've just had this one plant forever. I'll give you the plant, but you got to give me half the seeds. And I was like, deal. So I got the clone, we grew out a little mom. He actually gave me like a pretty big size clone, like a 1 gallon, like almost a ready to flower size plant. I barely did anything to it, transplanted it, put it in the tent, and like out of respect for homie, just flowered the whole plant, no clones. Those were the first Seattle soda seeds to exist, and then I just repeated that same one, but on a larger scale. I took like 12 of his plants once I gave him the seeds and got permission. I did like the whole room of that one plant, and I just redid that cross, the blueberry time wreck to the UW purple. And then the resulting, I mean, it was kind of cool. Like I learned early in the industry that you just do what you say you're going to do, and then it goes a long way. It was an unattainable cut, before I said I was going to give him half the seeds. And at the time I made the seeds, I didn't really know what the fuck I was doing. Like the amount of seeds I gave him was just like a little dime baggy, but he was pumped to have a version of his plant that he's had forever, like, so now he can kind of like, everyone wants to just relax a little on the genetic side. That's how I got into the tissue culture thing. They just want to have a stored version of their shit so they could just go on vacation or something, right?
Right.
You just not lose sleep over the dosatron breaking or the fucking pump going out, or did they pay the kid enough to not, fuck him over or whatever, like it was weird back in the day. Like you're a slave to a plant, and if you've had it since that long, you're like a slave to that clone, so it kind of just like, like since then it was kind of a cool relationship I had with that guy. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he grew the seeds and he was calling them things like Black Mamba. And he's like, "Do you want to see the Black Mamba?" And I was like, "Oh, I call those Seattle soda. Yeah, sure. What do you got?" And they're just blacked the fuck out, just blacked out like cookies. It looks like a cookies bud. It wasn't like the fluffy UW, but it was more like this hard, dense. And it was kind of funny to call it Black Mamba. But then he started making ISO hash with it, and now we're like, "Oh, now I see where you got Black Mamba."
That's awesome.
But yeah, I've had Seattle soda for a long ass time. Like I learned that I just wanted to breed my own shit because I wanted to have my own stuff. And like when I moved to Seattle, it was kind of cool to have like a sentimental version, of your grow history, or I don't know how to describe it other than that. Like a timeline of your grow life. So like when people still have like those Seattle soda packs, I'm like, damn, I hand wrote that when I first started to grow, and you have one of those. That's really fucking cool to me. Or like you're growing a plant that I have almost, a decade and a half's experience with. So like I almost recognize its grandkids at this point. Just the longer you do the exact same thing, the longer you see the similarities, the traits, all that other stuff. And that's like the enjoyable part, I think. Like when people give you stuff and they tell you what it is, that's the coolest part. Them coming up and buying a pack of seeds, I'm like, I appreciate it. That's cool. But someone else that doesn't even want a pack of seeds, who just wants to show me what they grew from seeds they bought 2 years ago, that's fucking hype. I'm like me and Neptune were getting off on that shit. We're like, holy fuck, what's this? Like everyone, look at this, that's that. Like the people helped me move the seeds because they brought flour and rosin from that shit, and I put it out right at the booth. And then people walk by like, what's that? I go, it's that right there. That's that. Fuck. Well, I'll take two. Like, what better way to move that shit?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not even a breeder, and I love watching that happen at places like the Dude Grows Cup, where you see a lot of those sorts of reactions or interactions with people, and it's just super awesome to see. Well, let's dive into the tissue culture section of the show. So can you give us a background? You mentioned earlier kind of like you were saying how just kind of the ease of mind.
Culture stuff is like the same thing. Like the reason I started SuperSeed and the reason I did tissue culture is the same goal. Is the genetic preservation of my starting of my cannabis journey, if you will. And I came up with some recipes right out of the gate for agar, like tissue culture media. And when I lived in Seattle, I had a landlord who was kind of cool, and he's like, "Mike, that seems novel and possibly proprietary. We can go to this law firm and see if we can protect any of this." And this is like the year they legalized cannabis, like 2012. And so he's like, that's when they might be able to protect it. So we went to a law firm, and the guy told me like, look, the reason a lot of companies don't patent or per trademark, or, my terminology might be incorrect, but the reason that they don't protect this stuff is because if you protect the recipe, you have to be sure that someone can't just alter it by a little bit and call it their own now, because like a lot of recipes aren't just public, because as soon as you protect it, you make the recipe public. So now everyone could read every ingredient in that gel, and you have to be damn sure that that exact ratio is the only one that's going to work. Like if someone adds a drop more water, or a little bit more of this or a little bit less of that, they could technically get the same result, but now you've just given them the key. So he said it's better to just put it out into the art. And then like the art, what he was referring to is like Facebook or something, like put it out there as you being the first to do it. Like use your flip phone photos.
Like open source.
Yeah. Once you put it out there, no one can undermine your protections now. So like I set up the Mike Hydro Instagram account specifically because of his advice. And some of my earliest posts are just tissue culture posts. So that way, if you did a cannabis tissue culture Google search, especially like 10 years ago, the only pictures you'd see are mine. There were some from universities, but not from closet growers. And that's kind of how that account got to grow, is because I would just post that. And then I knew for the longest time that I couldn't be undermined in my own field, because I'd be able to prove these photos are timestamped a year before they even started. So you're just...
And so would you say that tissue culture is something achievable for home growers and for
Yeah.
home people.
Do you believe you can cultivate mushrooms at home?
I do.
I do.
Well, they're very similar, right? So if you believe you can produce a sterile culture, do I believe you can produce a sterile culture? Yes.
Yeah.
Like, does it help to have a grow knowledge? Sure. Like a lot of the I mean, a lot of the labs I've seen that have fresh out of school PhD style technicians, their main failures are just they just haven't been around pot plants long enough to know what's even healthy. So you'll go into these labs and they're like, why doesn't it look good? You know, and then I get hired to go out there as a consult and I'm like, they look really good. They're not selecting the best ones. You know, you guys need to help the technicians because they don't grow plants. So you're like, everything's sterile, but like they need to be calling the ugly and weak. They need to be going in that room going, this doesn't look like a healthy plant, and killing it. Because like it's just as much about obtaining the good genetics as it is about reducing the bad ones. You know, so like if you have a technician who's really good at tissue culture who's never grown, the lab's not going to look that strong. But if you have someone who's had a lot of growth experience and they have some pretty good culture experience, you're going to look at the tissue cultures and go, nope, that's not growing the way I want it. That one's not growing the way I want it. This one's growing better than I even thought it could. I'm just going to isolate those nodes to 10 additional containers and then rock that. Because it's more, for lack of a better term, you're phenohunting a plant for its best cells. Like you're taking one individual plant and you're going to hunt it every node to find the strongest individual representation. And if you don't know what's better than what anecdotally, visually, you know, without getting paperwork, if you can't just look at a plant and go, that one's healthy and that one's not healthy, you're not going to be good at the tissue culture part. You might be good at storing a bunch of material, but you're not going to be really doing anything, you know, favorable for the genetics of that material because you're not really isolating good and bad. You're just putting it all on a shelf. So it's like you could have, if you have a good eye at growing, you'll be able to quickly look at these plants and go, that's not successful. That's not successful. These two are successful. And like you don't need very many successes. You just need a couple of them because then you could isolate those cultures and mass produce them.
So what kind of environmental conditions are people parameter wise looking for when they're setting up their cultures and stuff like that?
The clone room.
So just your basic 70 and 70.
Yeah. When you actually start to get success, you'll be able to manipulate things like temperature and lighting, and then that's how you could regulate growth rates. Because once you've like got a confidence with your media you're using, you have them in containers that you like, you have plants that are growing. Now the only other variables are things like temperature and lighting. So let's say your goal is to have a genetic catalog that's low maintenance. You might want to drop the temperatures down to 65, 66, 67, and move the lights a little further away from the plants. And now what you'll have is plants that grow slower, you know, and then they'll be a little bit more stretchy so that by the time you do want to cut them, you'll have nice space internodal in the containers. So like you're just isolating very, very little variables, you know, and then adjusting them for whatever the results that you want. If a client wanted you to make a bunch of those, you would put them under a warmer rack, like 72, 73, put a couple of 3 lights on them, you know, 3 clone bars on them. Now they're going to start pushing on the lids. If you wanted to be in the lab every day, you'd have it a little warmer and a little bit more light. If you wanted to go to the lab like twice, 3 times a week, you'd have it a little colder, you know, a little less lighting. Just enough to keep the plants growing and happy, but not enough to accelerate growth for, you know, mass production or whatever.
So, I was gonna mention that on YouTube I've found a channel. This woman, her channel is called Plants in Jars, and she shows how to tissue culture at home with various like home plants or whatever. She never does weed on her show, obviously, but I've seen kind of in like tissue culture setups and things. Like on the pro end, you have to have these like flow hoods and all these things to like create a like sterile environment. But it also sounds like you're a very practical dude. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how far do people need to go to create this, like, sort of sterile environment when they're actually going through the tissue culture process?
So I created a product through Athena, like a take-home Athena tissue culture kit. I actually invented that with them so that people could just take one thing home and work on everything by themselves. It comes with every single tool, and it comes with a complete cartoonized SOP, so you could just follow the cartoon step by step. That's like an Athena product that they released a couple of years ago with a bunch of my IP. And that was a way that I could kind of give back to a million people at once, since I can't be everywhere. I can only be here. A lot of people have had success with that thing and realized it's like a gateway to what they want to do. Some people got it and realized that they don't want to do that kind of stuff, because like being a tissue culture technician is a lot like being a trimmer. Um, it doesn't matter what you're paid, it doesn't matter anything. You're literally doing this job that's like super tiny, tedious little trim work, and you have to like hyper focus on it. And even like, I don't even know how to describe it, but the small, like doing it for as long as I have, even the smallest things would be frustrating after a while. It's just so. And that in order to not have to just cut myself into a million pieces and teach everyone the worst aspects or the least favorite aspects of the job, I had that kit come out. And then they're tools for, if you're already new tissue culture, you could take that kit and like I put it on an airplane and show up in a different state, and I can come and cut clones out of your grow and then fly them back to my lab and work on it there. It's like it's a portable tool for people who already know what they're doing. Or if you don't know what you're doing, you could open that thing up and have a pretty good stab at it. Like, are you going to succeed on your first try? Maybe. But like after 100 tries, if you really cared to learn, you'd be a lot better than, if you never got something like that. The bottleneck.
And I'm sure like with growing, your failures are the things that elevate you to learn and be more successful in your
100%.
next attempts,
The first couple of times I did it was with a tote and turned over. There was a kit that used to be offered. And like I had, out of like 100 cultures, I probably had 90 failures. I just assumed the whole thing was a failure and I discarded even the successful ones. But then fast forward, when I did one of the bigger brands in Los Angeles, I was doing some of these older cuts, and those high failure rates were anticipated. I already knew that I was going to have a high failure rate on a dirty ass old OG cut. I already anticipated I was going to have high failure rates on these clones that I was told have been around for 25 years. And if you anticipate a high failure rate, you just take more propagations, and then the ones that are successful feel even more successful. And then I was looking back in hindsight of when I first began, thinking of all those failures that were actually successes, like you said, like, okay, 90 failed. So what? Those 10 that made it, what if that was the branch that didn't have thrips? And I literally like threw away all the ones that had the thrips. You know what I mean? Like, and I could have just isolated the clean ones right there. After 2 or 3 months, if the plant's still alive in the test tube, you have a really good, culture there. If it's still green after a few months, no contamination, just like a mushroom culture. If you're doing, I don't know how the kits have people culturing. Sometimes it's like grain to grain or something like that. But if they're using actual agar, plating petri dishes, liquid cultures, it's all the same. There's a lot of similar knowledge there. And like, just because it's mycelium, you're still isolating better pieces of that mycelium to push forward. And as mushroom growers, like, sure, it's this strain of mushroom, but some people have way better cultures of it than others.
Yeah.
It's this strain, sure, I get it. But like, they're able to produce 10 times. I mean, whatever I'm trying to say here. They're able to produce double with their culture of that same strain because they've just isolated a better version of it, a more pure version of it.
Right.
One more piece, kind of educational piece that we want to throw out there is the acclimation of your tissue culture plant. Like, say I'm ordering from you and I'm receiving a tissue cultured plant. Can you talk about the intensity of acclimation as opposed to just getting a cut off someone?
So I typically don't sell. I've never sold a tissue culture plant myself. I run programs that enable nurseries to produce their own mother stock. So I'd rather have a program where the nursery has their entire collection in a lab, sterilized, working on the collection, to which they then pull out prize examples to produce on a larger scale. So like, I would almost recommend not just purchasing direct tissue culture stock unless you already have a lab and the understanding on what to do with that stock. A tissue culture plant's going to come, like, let's say we were buying it for, well, let's use cannabis. They're going to come smaller. I mean, they're going to have these guarantees, right? Sterility, yada, yada, lab reports, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as you open that in your environment, it now has the same guarantees as your environment does. There's no trick about that. You know, like, why did it catch spider mites as soon as I opened it? It's like, do you have spider mites? Well, yeah, I do, but this is supposed to be from tissue culture. Like, well, I get it, you know, but you're better off with a program that just starts with your mom room starts with tissue culture moms, and then they have a shelf life. Those moms you're propagating off of maybe 2 or 3 runs, and then discarding the entire thing. And in the meantime, on the back end, you've already duplicated those varietals. And maybe the market doesn't even want those ones anymore. So you've already duplicated that row as the new variety the market wants. That's another big issue with tissue culture, is that, like, it takes a very long time to produce the quantities. Like, let's say you're an outdoor grower and you're like, Mike, I know you got a perfect culture of green crack. I want 10,000 of them. I would say it doesn't make any sense for me to give you 10,000 tissue culture green cracks, because for an outdoor guy, that's really harsh. Now you're basically going to have to set up an acclimation center similar to seed starting to get these little shits to clone size. What I would recommend is, actually, if you have a nursery spot, clear out your nursery spot, clean the fuck out of your nursery spot. We'll bring the tissue culture plants over there, maybe, and grow them up into clone size if you have time. If you don't have time, then let me grow them out here into moms and then propagate them into conventional clones. You're still going to get, as long as they're done in a sterile environment, you're still going to get all those benefits of that culture that's stronger than the other cultures.
But if I'm, like, say I'm just home guy,
yeah,
and I've got through that process, I've now got my tissue cultured plant ready to go into soil.
a dome,
What is
home dome, just like you would treat it like a seedling. I'd put them, like, some people will propagate. So, like, let's say they're ready to go. Some people will just cut them out of the container, dip them in rooting hormone, and plug them into rock wool. They'll just leave the root system and everything in the container, and they'll just propagate the new growth.
Wow, that makes sense. I see.
The benefit is just propagating off of what's successful. You know what I mean? What's a
right,
stabilized, successful culture. So, like, there's other ways to do it. A lot of people will root in vitro, but it seems popular in cannabis to root ex vitro. So you're just pretty much decapitating everything in your culture vessels and then propagating them however you choose to. Then they'll do, like, those 98 cell packs. You know, you'll have 1,000,000 little plants really quick. But then you have to have a good place to veg those. You know, like, that program still requires a vegetative partner, whether it's you know, or someone else. Like, you could, now you have all those perfect plants, 98 plants, and if you don't grow them nice, you know, like, you could even just hand it off to someone who feeds them wrong, and then that whole trade will look like flashed out. So it really goes hand in hand with a successful nursery. Like, if your nursery is not on point, a tissue culture lab's not going to help you that much.
Right.
If you're like an at-home grower, a tissue culture lab could help you if your nursery is not on point, by you eventually storing enough stuff to when you learn how to grow right. You know, and then once you figure out how to keep a nursery on point, you could bring things, you know, back out. But if you have a really healthy veg, you could store all your shit, and then you could feel confident. Like, you could have enough containers of a variety that you could kill the moms and not have to worry about. And then you'll pull out the other flavor that you wanted. You know, I think, like, things like Gorilla Glue from 2016 or whatever, it doesn't sound cracking right now. But in a while, like a 2014 or 2016 Gorilla Glue cut's going to sound cracking. So they just need to be somewhere right now, not getting beat up. They don't,
yeah.
you know, like, and I can't predict the future, right? Maybe that's not the one that's going to come back, but that's how the market's been trending. You know what I mean? Like,
I think people are kind of pining for some of the older flavors that, you know, were kind of blown off the market when the whole cookie thing happened. You know, prior to that, OG decimated a bunch of varieties. But I see people kind of wanting, you know, multiple flavors, multiple menus. I don't think people are stuck on the one anymore. We talk about that a lot. So, of the varieties that you've been able to kind of save over this decade or so, what were some of the varieties that you were most stoked to be able to kind of save and bring back to life?
And I've worked with a lot of brands, a lot of bigger brands, like some of the ones you've mentioned and some other ones. I mean, it's more exciting for me to just help brands save their own shit. Like I feel like a lot of big cannabis brands are quick to lose their identity. They spent a lot of time on being famous for a handful of cuts, and then as soon as like they realize there's competition in the market, they just drop all their main, you know what I mean? Like instead of just being known for a handful of cuts that you guys grow so well that no one else can touch, they'd rather be like the 31 flavors that everyone else is. So that's main. It's like not like a particular strain, but I love it when you go to a spot and they have a flagship strain. Like there's this really cool spot in Seattle called Lifted, and they have a bunch of stuff that's just theirs, no one else has. So they're just saving it for that reason, and I think that's like the most humble and best reason to be saving something. Like there's also like more greedy labs who just want every cut in the world and to save everything for their own gain in the future. I get that too, but it's like it's more exciting to like help a mom and pop shop pick up something that's maybe not producing as much as it used to and just kind of get it back to where it's supposed to be and give them the skills to do that themselves, because then they're going to be producing those unique, like artisan style strains, not just going to be running everyone else's bullshit. So I like it. Like I said, I think it's cooler to preserve individual catalogs that have been vetted. I don't know all the strains, like you hear so many different strain names, and you go to any spot, they have all their in-house crazy shit too. But I'd prefer that. I'd prefer going to a spot like in Oklahoma or something, and then you don't really recognize much of their shit because it's their shit, and then you see it and it's good. I'm like, yeah, dude, don't change a thing. Like, I understand you want me to help you get a cut from California. I wouldn't do that. I don't think the California cuts are going to do you any favors right now. You might have a different name on the bag, but that weed isn't as good as your weed. Like, just keep at this, because I love smoking weed, and you have great weed to smoke. Don't drop all this good shit because you're chasing some other kind of bullshit. Like, I don't,
Right.
you know what I mean? Don't drop all your good in-house cuts because you want a California cut. Like, that's no good. It's no good for the whole market.
I had a couple questions that I wanted to hit you with before, because we're coming up on the last 10 minutes or so of the interview. So before I forgot, I wanted to go back to the kind of home grower scenario where maybe I do have some strains that I found that I love. Like JR's talked about the Tiki Rain and these various strains that he loves, and I've found some that I really like, but as a home grower with not a lot of space, it's kind of a pain in the ass to keep these strains alive. I'm growing it outside right now. I'm gonna have to take clones soon that are gonna somehow have to, that version of that plant's gonna have to survive for the next several months or whatever till next grow season or what have you, and it's just hard logistically. So can you speak to a couple questions? One, I wanted to know like how long this process takes from doing the tissue culture process to having something that I can actually use. And then I was also curious, is there a way for me to like preserve it in time or whatever so that I could keep it for several months and then be able to use it at a later date? Or do I really need to like, take a clone and just go through the traditional kind of cloning process or what have you?
So I would recommend in spring, like if you're going to do seed, for example, let's say you already have a clone that you like. It's spring and you just put it outside. As soon as you get new growth off of it, I would tissue culture that new growth. Then the plant's still growing outside in the meantime. So if you strike out, you have another attempt. It's not like you're killing any of that stock the entire time it's growing, not flowering, early spring, So then if it's just one variety, I'm probably doing like 10 containers of it every day until I have a good stock. Now I have maybe 50 containers, like 50 individual tissue culture containers of that one plant. Let's call it JR. And so I'm watching those JR propagations. And in the meantime, some are contaminated. Some of them are just stunted. They're not growing that great. But a third of them are taken off, and then I go outside and the plant's still healthy. So now that those third that are taking off, this may be in 2 months. And like, you really want to let it go 2 months because you don't just want to have plants that are healthy. You also want to make sure they're not systemically contaminated. So when you're doing mushroom work or tissue culture work or plating work, some of these microbes can be seen just by plating them. So like you're doing a little propagation, and within 24 hours to 72 hours, you'll see bacteria blooms or yeast blooms or fungal blooms. After that first couple of weeks, if you don't see anything, now you're just looking for plant vigor, plant health. But then after 2 or 3 months, you're pretty much in the clear. But between those two places, you could have another kind of growth. You could have other fungal growth that's in the plant that hasn't bothered to hit the media. So you really want them to go about you really just want to push it 2 or 3 months to guarantee sterility. In that meantime, you've been able to take enough propagations that you're happy with the overall health of your cultures indoors. Now your plant outside's flowering, right? But you've already thrown away 50%, and not just because they were contaminated, but like you threw 20% contamination, then you culled another 10 to 15% just because you wanted to, and they were ugly. And now you have like a really good section of these plants. They'll grow till they want to hit the lid. Once they hit the lid, you have to take them back under the flow hood. So maybe at the 2-month mark, you'll have to spend another week, and you'll be topping these plants or propagating off of these plants, and you'll just be putting them back into closed containers. You could probably do 2 cycles of this before next year, right? And then by the time next year hits, you'll only have the strongest examples of that plant because you've been doing a culling system. It'd be equivalent to starting like 100 clones, and then every 2 or 3 weeks just killing off 10, 15 clones. By the time you need these plants, you're going to have the strongest 10 or 15 available of that material. So you're kind of just topping plants that are successful, putting them back into culture vessels, and then those are growing. But to every time, you'll probably top twice in a year. I mean, you'll probably only put these containers in there. You'll go 3 months. You'll top them. Those are the propagations, which will probably be next spring. If it was just like you were, just doing a cycle of yearly outdoor planting.
Yeah.
I'm guessing your first transplants of culture would be after 2 or 3 months tops. Then you'll put those back in culture. Since you don't need to go another 3 months because you've already proven sterility, as soon as those grow, those are propagations that are healthy and sterile. So it's kind of like from that point, you could root things in 3 weeks. So it's like you're topping plants after 2 or 3 month mark, you're rooting after 3 weeks. So maybe 3 to 4 months, you can probably have little propagated plantlets. But like even having a tissue culture plantlet isn't the value. The value is after 3 months, you're going to have a propagation. I mean, you're going to have a culture that you can propagate off of whenever you want. It's basically even when you use it, you won't use all of those vessels. You'll just take like a third of them off. You'll never give away your whole culture. You'll keep that. Once you have it in your lab, it'll never leave your lab. Just parts of it will. So like what you culture on the first summer, you'll have for the entirety of your lab. And then next summer you can culture a new strain and whatever.
And so how close to cryogenically freezing plant tissue are they?
I've done it with callus cells. I can't get callus cells to form back to nodes. You could cryogenically freeze branches and stems and all kinds of shit, and then tissue culture those back out. The problem is like, I don't have the technology to turn callus into nodes. I can root callus cells. I don't know anyone who's doing calluses into like getting a callus cell to then shoot on its own without crazy chemicals. But like, most other plants are capable of it, and there's a lot of technology that says it's very possible. I've had a few attempts at it and a few failures at it, but I just haven't done a lot of research and development on it myself, so I can't really say. It's kind of cool because it's true, like that technology is real. It's just like someone's going to have to develop a protocol specifically for cannabis to really like exploit that.
I appreciate you explaining that whole process. That was really cool. Just helped me really understand, because I did have this kind of misunderstanding that, when the pro grows, when they tissue cultured something, it was kind of like freezing it in time. But it's cool. It's great to understand that it is kind of this continuous process that you're going through. Well, cool. Let's see. I think we got through a lot of the major questions that JR had for you. So I think he had a fun question there at the end. Is that right, JR?
Yeah. Tell us about your love for guitars.
Oh, I've been collecting guitars since I was like 13 or 14, but it's one of those things where when you're young, like what's cool and what you really want, and that you can't afford it because you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what generation you're from.
Yeah, right.
And then like adult, you get to make adult decisions. You know, you get to go like, hey, maybe I got my shit covered this month. Can I get that thing that I wanted when I was 12? Is it gonna ruin me? No, you know, and then you realize it doesn't, and then that goes from there, dude. Like just like anything else. Like some people like cars and other I tried to get into cars, dude. I spent a bunch of money on this car, body work, engine work. I went to go flip it, like literally to make $1,000. And then like I had someone who wanted it, and I'm like telling them, dude, it's mint, ready to go. I go to start it, it doesn't start that day. I'm fucking done with cars, dude. I'm fucking done with cars, man. Like I think I made $200 on it, and I was happy to just get rid of it at that point.
Yeah, just be done with it, huh?
Yeah, it could have been simple. I don't know. I don't fucking know cars. See.
So what are your so I grew up, my dad owned a guitar store, and I grew up like around guitars and stuff. I've got my dad's guitar tattooed on my arm. So you're speaking my language. So what are some of your favorites in your collection that you have?
I like 50s and 60s Fenders and Gibsons. So I have like even like 59 Jazzmaster probably, or like me and Neptune recently got a 1965 Polaris White SG special. So it's like a white Gibson SG, and the white ones are really freaking rare. And then we also found another 59 Jazzmaster that came in. Like Neptune Mark got hooked on it with me because we went to a guitar show one time, and I brought all my guitars. And then we're local over here in OC. So people would walk up to the booth and they'd show me a guitar, and I'd say, this is fucking sick. And they'd be like, will you give me $800 for it? I'm like, I guess I'll give you 600 for it, you know? And that's like, done. I'll put the guitar right back up for sale for like $1,200, go back and smoke a joint, you know, come back out, and someone's willing to give you $1,200 for it. And so just kind of like, I don't know, you got to do something that's not work. You got to, even though like we're kind of like savvy, annoying hustlers. So even if we're not working, we try to turn it into some kind of work. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does.
For no reason whatsoever.
It's like how you got to survive in this world today. You got to have several side hustles.
You can't even have fun without thinking about how this is cost. You know, like you got to break even having fun these days. So so that's kind of like what that's about. And it's just like when you're buying weed and selling weed just so you could smoke more weed. If you want cool ass guitars, you gotta basically buy a bunch of guitars and sell a bunch of them.
Yeah. Another random question that just came to mind, since you guys specialize in older stuff. What do you think of Fender? I think it's mostly Fender that does this. They make the new guitars that they like relic to look old or whatever. Because I've noticed they've been doing that. They kind of like reissue.
Gibson and Fender both do that. It's because like it really kind of pays homage. I mean, I think it's kind of whack, but it really pays homage to like how cool Leo Fender or like Les Paul was, because those guys made guitars, like prototype guitars, electric guitars back in the 50s, that these companies now, with all the technology in the world, fucking almost 100 years later, can't figure out how to beat. So like the same knobs that Leo put on a prototype, they still copy that same fucking design. Not a single wire has changed. So it's like, it's almost embarrassing that they literally have to replicate their first models. Like, I don't know what other scenario is like that. Like that the prototype is so good that now you go almost 100 years and the company's like swearing how accurate they are to their first, you know, like why can't they make anything better?
It'd be like Ford selling Model Ts still or whatever.
Exactly. Perfect replica Model Ts, you know, and you're just like, I mean, if they really couldn't do anything better, you know, if you really couldn't, I think there's probably a market for Ford to release like 5 Model Ts a year. You know what I mean? Some rich dude, they would pay perfect replica Model T. But like, it'd be embarrassing if Ford hasn't released a new car since the Model T. And now what they're doing is they're taking Model Ts and they're like scuffing up the tires, they're scratching the windows. They're making it like you bought it.
Right.
You know, whatever, you know, what, 1940s or whatever. I mean, I don't know when Model T came out, but they're like faking like when you bought particular models, when they, you know, and then they're like scuffing them up because they can't figure out anything else.
Gotta get that patina on there.
It's good for the used market though, because like Gibson is notorious for, so I have like an old white Les Paul, like a Randy Rhodes 77 Gibson Les Paul custom. And it's all buckle rashed and all fucked up like you're talking about, but from age. But then Gibson makes a custom shop version of it. And I bought this guitar for $3,000, like the used one from 70s. Gibson releases a custom shop version of the 75, same guitar, but they're making it seem like it's, from 75. And they scratch it all up and shit. And so we're trying to sell it for like $24,000. So now it's like, if you happen to have one of these things that you just paid $3,000 for and you have the original, Gibson's over here selling a scratched up fake version of it. You know what I mean? So now the used market just tripled. Now they're $10,000, that $3,000 guitar.
Oh, wow.
And people would much rather have the original one than the fucking. So when Gibson and Fender like drop a new Mustang bass or they drop a new Les Paul and they make the price tag $5,000-$6,000, and you can still find the original one for cheaper than that, you see there's like a big gap in the market. Like I started buying these Fender Mustang guitars. Everyone thought they were like little cheap kids guitars, but I was able to get them for $300, $400, $1,000. Now they're all $5,000 because the Stratocasters are $64,000, $65,000. So it's like the Mustangs, to know that there's a difference of $50,000 between these two guitars made in the same factory by the same people at the same year, same paint, same color, same wood, same everything. I'm like, there's a huge gap right there. I'm just going to buy all these ones and wait for the gap to correct. Even if it doesn't go all the way, I've been right so far.
That's cool. Yeah, I've been following like various subreddits for various like musicians' guitars, and it's fun to just see people recreating guitars. And I've just seen even just like versions of famous musicians' guitars, their value fluctuates. It's just such an interesting space to watch.
Me and Neptune bought a guitar at the not the last Orange County show, but 2 shows ago. We bought this guitar called a Buck Owens acoustic. And we sold it to our good friends in Seattle, like this really awesome guitar shop called Emerald City. And then like last week, they posted a picture of Elvis Costello, like strumming that same guitar. So I sent it to Neptune, like, yo, bro, you were strumming that guitar. And now he's strumming this guitar, same exact guitar. Like that's the one.
That's wild.
And then there's Elvis Costello's like holding the guitar, and Mark doesn't know how to play guitar, but I have a picture of him strumming it too. So it's like, that's the cool part of music. Yeah. It's not like, is that valuable? No, but is it cool? Yeah.
For sure.
Super.
Well, before we go, I wanted to we love to give our guests a chance to give shout outs to whatever you guys want, whether it's your projects, friends in the industry, whatever it is. We just love to kind of, as a thank you for your time, throw it over to you and you guys can do with it what you will.
I'll go first. Shout out JR, shout out the podcast, shout out Neptune.
Sick.
Thanks, brother.
We got big drops coming up on Friday, some Cali Connection drop on Friday. So if you guys are looking for seeds, we have a huge Cali Connection drop coming up, and he gave us some extra packs to give away. So if you guys are interested, hit us up for Cali Connection. Swerve is one of the oldest guys in the industry, so definitely look up for that.
Yeah, hit him up. And next week we have another episode with the Nugs Deep. We're going to be talking some freak show.
Yep.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate your time. As always, Neptune, it's awesome to see you, man. I hope you have a great rest of your day. SuperSeed Co. It was really cool to meet you. I really appreciate
Mike.
The way, like you at the end there, the way you broke it down was like super interesting and helpful. Just helped me understand this whole thing. So really appreciate that. And also the breakdown of your strains at the top of the show is super interesting too. So we really appreciate your time today, and thanks for being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dudes.
Awesome. And JR, any last words before I kind of throw us out?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for all the support, all the buzzers out there who've been showing me a lot of love, helping me get through this surgery I just went through. And I just want to thank you all a lot. It means a lot to me, all the support.
Oh, yeah. JR has been on the mend, and it seems like things are finally on the upward trajectory for him.
Yeah,
so keep him in your thoughts, and we're just excited to see the positive change in just over the last month or two. Things have really been trending up in the upward direction for you, man.
And come see us at the booth 443 at Emerald Cup. We'll be there this year. Come hang out with us. We're gonna have we'll have a whole bunch of stuff to give away.
Yes, we will be at the Emerald Cup this year in Oakland. We hope to see you there. We'd love to see you there. We're going to be interviewing growers, and we can even do live streams there if we want. So stay tuned for that. And if you are in Oakland or in the Bay Area, please come to the show. If you listen to this on your podcast feeds, or if you prefer podcasts, search Cannabis on Spotify, any sort of podcast app that you have. You can download this episode and any of the other episodes of our show. And of course, we're on YouTube, so please like and subscribe over there. We really appreciate your support. And as always, JR,
growers love.
Peace, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.